Our grand finalists have now been locked in at the Blast Paris Major. It will be GamerLegion taking on Vitality. But first, we're going to do a quick recap of our semi-finals. Going to be discussing both of them. Of course, joined by Dualism and Frog again. And we'll start with you, Frog, and we'll go with our first of the semi-finals that was played today between Heroic and GamerLegion. I think it's safe to say we've had a bit of a surprise and a bit of a shock with this one.
Oh, definitely. I mean, this is. I'm not just bitter because I had Heroic as winning the whole thing, but this is just genuinely quite, I guess, a surprise. We all knew it was possible. We all knew Gamer Legion's the kind of team that could punish the tier one teams if they kind of just play poorly on the day, and that's exactly what happened today, in my opinion. I mean, Ancient definitely had some good moments from both teams. Heroic, especially on their T side. So overall, a fairly convincing map in the manner they were able to close it out. But definitely a bit of a shocking CT side, a slow start into that series, and I mean, Inferno again, a few rounds where Heroic looked pretty good, but 14-16 doesn't really do it justice. I feel like Gamer Legion looked much better throughout that entire game than Heroic did. And well, yeah, 6 to 16 on Mirage. I don't know, Vince. This was just a really, really disappointing run from Heroic, or not run, but series. And I don't want to take anything away from Gamer Legion. They played very well today. Emma, continuing on his upwards trajectory. Acor hitting some nice shots. Isaac really showed up, which is amazing to see because he is such an underrated player. But to me, it wasn't just a case of you know, both teams playing really, really well and Gamer Legion just coming out on top. It was just a case of Heroic starting off okay and then being pretty bad to kind of mediocre, especially on Mirage. And from there, Gamer Legion just played well and were able to capitalize on that.
So, I mean, very similar sort of question for you as well, Dualism, if you have anything to add, where, we all said Gamer Legion had the potential. It wasn't a foregone conclusion, especially maybe after their performance against Monty. They would have definitely won over a few more fans, a few more people. Ema, as we've mentioned, has been fantastic. Chewy as well, very, very good. And you look at this team and think, yeah, they probably are going to get beat by Heroic. It might be close, though. But a 2-1 performance, what are your thoughts on this? Because I honestly, I was a bit shell-shocked when I saw this game. I was super, super confused.
I think the main thing with Gamer Legion is that not only were they 0-2 at one point in Challenger stage, but they had lost to the Mongols and Complexity to get to that 0-2. And they beat Mao's OG and fours to make it to Legends, and then they lose to Navi, but then they beat Nine Fnatic, also beat Apeks, who we'll talk later about, and Monty as well. But I think that they hadn't really been tested by any of these top teams yet. And the one arguable encounter that you can have, and it's a BO1, you can't put too much stock into it. They did lose to Navi, and obviously we saw Navi get eliminated already, so it is that kind of. I think the biggest surprise is that Gamer Legion rose to the challenge with kind of going a bit 0 to 100 in terms of their level of competition.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but do you think it's safe to say that Heroic choked this a little bit? I don't want to take anything away from Gamer Legion, but I'm completely alongside what you're building up there in terms of their lack of being tested properly from top tier teams. They get through to the semi-finals. This wasn't the Heroic I think a lot of people were expecting. Was it a case of choke, or are we maybe taking away some of the glean from Gamer Legion's performance by saying that?
I think it's too harsh to say it was a choke. I think it was just that Heroic, kind of as Frog kind of touched on, Heroic didn't really show up. It wasn't. This was not top level Heroic. This wasn't Heroic at the level that they were when they were number one in the world and very dominant, and Gamer Legion rose and overcame that. I think this was very, very lackluster from Heroic, and that Gamer Legion did play well. I think that their individuals are playing well, and they are able to deal with a team like Heroic, even though Heroic on paper should be beating them most days of the week. Um, but I just think it was slow from Heroic and good from Gamer Legion. I wouldn't say that that was the most incredible performances that we've ever seen at a major or anything.
Yeah, and to kind of go on about that as well, I've got some stats here which I think kind of builds into your point you were raising, Frog, that the 1614, the 1613 on Ancient and Inferno respectively maybe doesn't paint the full picture. Heroic won all 4 pistol rounds on those 2 maps, and they still barely squeaked by with trading back and forth with 2 close performances. They also converted. They had something like 12 rounds, I want to say, over the basis of 2 maps that were off the back of pistols. When it came to rifle rounds, GL were far superior in every single caveat, in every single way. And when we get through to Mirage, the 16-6 loss that you touched on before, Frog, it's down with an uncharacteristically dismal performance. A guy that I touted yesterday as being like Mr. Consistent when it comes for Heroic, he drops his 0.42 rating on Mirage and it was a complete non-factor. So I think that probably goes into what you're both saying, that this is not the Heroic that maybe we expected, not the Heroic that we were expecting to come out all guns blazing, to make amends for that very, very disappointing Rio loss. Quite the opposite. But then you look at EMA on the side of GL, 1.87 on Mirage, 23 frags with a 1.4 overall. That is a phenomenal performance from him.
Definitely. I mean, again, I hate to bang on about this, but I touched on it yesterday. This was Heroic's major to lose, and that's what they did. I touted Vitality as kind of not necessarily being favorites, but it felt like the storyline would be really good, and overall, I think they have a really good chance of winning this major still. But this was exactly what I was worried about for Heroic, is them having this moment where they just, again, choke is maybe a strong word, but the pressure just got to them. And they weren't playing the way they normally play. Cadian goes for a hero play on Inferno in that final round. If he had just played with his teammates, there you go. You're able to get into OT, and the momentum's on your side. You build that up. They just didn't play like themselves. And the whole reason I had them as favorites to win this thing is because they're the only team in Tier 1 that, over a large period of time, felt like they were actually playing Tier 1 Counter-Strike, where they're playing their own game and they're able to shut down up and coming teams. They're able to shut down Tier 2 teams. They don't trade back and forth as much. And that's just not the Heroic we saw today.
Yeah, I think those are very, very strong points. And just before we do head to our second best of 3, I'd like to channel Frog's excellent points into a question for you here, Dualism. With their consistency and the fact that they are experienced now, it's not really an excuse anymore for Heroic. It hasn't been for quite some time. Do you think, Dualism, that they maybe overlooked GamerLegion a little bit? And some of these uncharacteristic decisions, the wide swings from KD and some of the decision makings that Frog was talking about, could that factor in? Do you think they were like already looking at Vitality perhaps in the finals?
I think so. I think that, and perhaps this is me misreading it, but I feel like a lot of top teams, when there is an up and coming team, that team will take a map off of a top team, and people will go, "Oh wow, this team's better than we thought. Anyway, we're better than that other team, so we'll beat them." And then another team gets beaten by them, and then the next team that faces them goes, "Wow, it's crazy that they beat the number 1 or 2 in the world, but we won't beat them. We won't lose to them, rather." And then the same thing happens until people do take them seriously. And I think that when it comes to a team like Heroic, when they've played against tier 2 teams and then beaten them in the past, I think it's because, yeah, pound for pound, they are a team where their individuals should and can outshine most teams in general overall. And I think that GamerLegion are not that type of quote quote tier 2 team. That this is a team where their individuals have shown up and overperformed, but have consistently overperformed, which has enabled them to then pretty much just take advantage of Heroic not firing on all cylinders, really.
And take advantage they certainly did, as they have booked themselves into the grand finals. And obviously we're going to talk about that second semi-finals that just finished just before we started recording this. They'll play against Vitality, who did 2-0 against Apeks. Again, Frog, we'll start with you. What are your initial thoughts or reactions coming out of this game? Because it was a fairly close one, all things considered.
Listen, I know I'm sounding really pessimistic, but I kind of came out of it a little disappointed. Maybe it's just the lingering taste from that Heroic GamerLegion game where I just felt like the top dog, so to speak, didn't show up. And Vitality did obviously come through in the series. They didn't drop a map, but man, did they make it close. And credit to Apeks. I mean, Stiko with the clutches, Knock as well. Um, even JL having some really incredible moments on Mirage, they played well. But I think it was another case of that tier 1 team not necessarily giving the opponent too much respect, so to speak, but you're not, you're trading rounds back and forth. You're not actually playing with each other. You're taking a lot of one-on-one duels. You're not on the same page. You're not like double swinging to kind of close out a round. And that gets close, The economy can get punished if you throw away too many rifles. It's the small things that you expect tier 1 teams to have mastered. And even if Vitality came out on top today, I didn't really feel that. There are a few rounds where I felt like, oh wow, Magiscon and Vertigo, especially, it's like, okay, he's getting the sick 3K. You can tell just in the confidence that he has when he's taking that, like when he's swinging to take that peek, the crosshair placement, the flashes coming in behind him. It's like, okay, that feels like tier 1. But those moments were very fleeting today, and I guess that's what just is kind of disappointing. And I'm hoping we kind of just see an overall better level tomorrow from Vitality and hopefully from GamerLegion as well. Because otherwise, well, they've already shown that they're a team that could punish you if you're not going to be at your 100%.
Interesting. So, Dualism, same question to you, but do you maybe see it a bit more optimistically than Frog does, or do you feel the same way that Vitality didn't really get into their A game against Apeks today?
There were a lot of moments that I was watching this game through my hands. There was a moment on Mirage, especially, where I want to say it was Stiko pushing up from bottom mid, and it was Apeks and somebody else on short, and Stiko had a Mac 10, and they chose to fight. Well, one person was walking away while Apeks was fighting, and then he gets a clutch with a Glock, which realistically should not be happening and wouldn't have happened had they both just gone for him. And moments like that are very, very painful to watch when, again, on paper, that should be a round that you win, close out, and shouldn't really be a problem. But I think for Apeks, it's just, while GamerLegion and Vitality have their stars who have shone this major, for Apeks, Jacob has fallen off as well in these playoff games. And I think that the difference between these teams where you have a player that is popping heads, killing everyone, and is kind of untouchable in the games versus somebody who is still doing well but just isn't quite there has definitely been a problem.
Yeah, I hate to point out like individual players, but I mean, my player that I'm going to go with a similar kind of thought process with you, Dualism, is going to be Kixon, actually, because he was an instrumental part as to why they beat Liquid in the previous match. Obviously, in the quarterfinals, he was absolutely ridiculous the entire game. Obviously, IGLing while also fragging super hard. And today, on Mirage in particular, I mean, he was absent. He was completely invisible. It felt like the calls weren't quite there. His aim wasn't quite there. It's harsh, right? Because this is one of those guys that is very, very new to this level of Counter-Strike. And so to point the finger and blame him, this is still a phenomenal performance to get through to the semi-finals. Is an outrageous overachievement for Apeks. So they can still hold their heads high. But if we're being critical and we're being honest, in this game, and Mirage in particular, they ended up losing 16-14. It was a super close game with Nork going just nuclear with the AWP in particular, having tons of impact. A player that typically goes under the radar for the likes of Stiko and Jacob and Kixon as well. Unfortunately, without him, it felt like that was a bit of a difference maker. And ultimately, Vitality did get across the line. They got the 16-14. They move into Vertigo, and then Majors just decides, yeah, this is my map, drops a 1.43, and kind of the rest is history. So it felt as if maybe the situation got the best of some of the players. Even that being said, though, if you put that caveat in, the fact that they took Vitality close in both maps and had like mini comebacks in both games, I guess I would be more on your side of things here, Frog, in the regard that it was a bit disappointing from Vitality. And, we can kind of build into the finals now because obviously we know what the finals are. It's tomorrow, going to be a best of 3, GamerLegion, Vitality. I'll start with you here, Frog. Have your opinions changed at all over the duration of this tournament as to, we said before Heroic should win. Well, they're no longer a factor. Vitality was certainly the second favourites to win it. Coming into this, have GamerLegion done enough to make you think they could actually beat Vitality and have a solid shot at doing so?
100%. And it's not, again, credit to GamerLegion, they're playing very well, but it's not just because of GamerLegion playing as well as they have. It's also just because of Vitality not playing as well as I was hoping they would. And so to me, I'm going into tomorrow just expecting, some madness pretty much. Would I love to see Vitality win? Of course, I think the storyline there is absolutely amazing. And same goes for Gamer Legion. It would be really incredible to see those guys, a group of players that have very much flown under the radar for a long time, to get crowned major winners. But I don't know. Ultimately, it's just hard to say because I really don't know what version of Vitality we're gonna get tomorrow. I feel like Zaiwu started off really hot on Mirage, then kind of disappeared. They managed to close out the map. Vertigo, he was there, but it's a map where they're usually very spread out across the board. And Magisk very much felt like the star player. He felt like him that map. Um, we'll see tomorrow. I mean, listen, Vitality have enough star players on this roster to make it work. But if it doesn't pull through, I mean, if I am can or sorry, Emma as we're pronouncing it now, if he can actually show up the way he has for the entirety of these last few days, yeah, Gamer Legion totally within the realms of possibility. I think it'd be crazy to say otherwise.
Yeah, the little thing in the back of my head though is like, I feel as if I've had the same thought multiple times in this major. Like, oh, there's no way Gamer Legion can beat Heroic. It happened. I also thought Monty were going to beat Gamer Legion. They didn't. And now we get through, and I don't want to be disrespectful at all to any of these sort of bottom bracket teams, but I would argue that Gamer Legion have probably had the tougher run to get through to the finals, beating Monty and Heroic, whereas Vitality have beat Into the Breach and Apeks. Now that's maybe a debatable topic for another time, but the fact that they've managed to just grind and brute force their way in here with some crazy individual talent, I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing from Gamer Legion's perspective, because they don't necessarily strike me as a team that is super set play heavy and super strategical and tactical. Not to take anything away from them, but it feels like they do rely a little bit more on EM and these kind of players just going nuclear. For you, Dualism, with Vitality coming in and being a little bit lackluster to maybe be slightly harsh, do you feel like they're still the firm favorites, considering the crowd, considering the atmosphere and everything that goes into this? Can Gamer Legion feasibly pull this one off, in your opinion?
I think it is possible. I think it is, of course, possible. I think at this point it is unreasonable to doubt them. But I do think, and I said yesterday that I would be a little upset if the French team, well, quote quote French team, didn't win. But I do think Gamer Legion do have their own. They have this. You cannot fluke your way into a grand final of a major, even if you're overperforming, even if everybody else is underperforming, even if your players are, just have a cohesion that they've not had before. I think that it is what it is at this point. I think you can't really take it away from Gamer Legion. Um, but at the same time, this is a French crowd for a French major. Kenny's gone now, so somebody needs to do it for France. And I think that my money would still be on Vitality, but I would also very easily see that money go down the toilet with Gamer Legion going absolutely insane.
Yeah, just a final point on this one as well, Frog, which I'll bring back to you and kind of get some of that coaching experience. One thing that Apeks talked about when he was on the stage afterwards in his post-game interview was how everyone was pulling their weight. It wasn't just the Zaiwu show, which I think we've discussed a few times now. Long gone are those days. Now we do have other heavy-hitting components in the squad that can show up. Spinks had a phenomenal Mirage performance, for example, and Dupree was also very good on that map. The fact is that they were bending with some of these comebacks, but they didn't break. And when you consider Apeks and the history that he's had as an IGL, a very emotional player, sometimes I think it's safe to say he has snapped and he has broken when the pressure was on. Could we maybe spin this in a positive way, that even with Vitality not being on their A game, even with them allowing Apeks to get back in with some questionable decisions and mistakes, the fact that they still held their ground could be the difference maker here, because skill's never really been a concern for these guys. We all know what they're capable of doing. I feel like it's always been more of the mental aspect of the game. Zonic said in himself, like, the mental aspect of Counter-Strike is probably the most important, because you get in your head so much, and there's so much that goes into the focus and the concentration levels. So from your perspective as a coach, looking into this and looking at the positives, do you think that that could actually bode better for Vitality, all things considered?
I'm not too sure. Listen, if you compare the way both matches went down today, the reason Vitality were really close against Apeks is that Stiko and Nock just had some really incredible late like round moments, essentially. Right, making clutch scenarios very, very close and kind of difficult for Vitality, but ultimately it often felt like Vitality were, finding the opening kills and then just kind of struggling, and then towards the end of the round, well, it goes 50-50 because it's a clutch scenario. Whereas the Heroic and GamerLegion game was kind of the opposite, where it's GamerLegion playing very grouped and explosive CS. They kind of just throw numbers at you, and when Ime is set up to essentially do that, he's going to thrive. I mean, I praised him, earlier today on Twitter, because I think not only is he hitting incredible shots when he's opening up a bomb site, but it's also his communication, right? From the voice comm moments we're getting, he's very, very vocal, but he's not just, being vocal for the sake of being loud. He's actually communicating really important information and doing it so efficiently. He's letting his teammate know, oh, this guy's not out yet. I'm right behind him. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And he's painting a very clear picture. So when you kind of throw that against what the Vitality we saw today, I'm not too sure if Vitality are going to be able to, you know, tackle that, so to speak, especially if we don't get a nuclear performance from Zaiwu. It's great to see that Vitality are able to have everyone show up and have really great maps. Um, but I'm kind of fearing that without one standout star, they might even get outshined by GamerLegion tomorrow.
Very interesting indeed. And I think at this point, as Dualism touched on, GamerLegion are undeniable. This idea of them fluking their way through, the Challenger stage and the Legend stage, and then through the quarterfinal, I think we can put that to bed once and for all. Like, they are legit. They are here. They're in the finals, and they do pose a very real threat to Vitality. Final question then, I'm going to ask you for a prediction. We've already said that all three of us agree Vitality are going to win, but I like a score prediction in particular, if you think it's going to be a 2-0 or a 2-1. Frog, do you think GamerLegion can pick up a map against Vitality tomorrow? Obviously, we don't know the maps yet, but overall, from your perspective.
I definitely think it's within the realms of possibility, and honestly, I hope to see it, because regardless of the outcome for tomorrow's match, I just really hope to see some great CS. And if GamerLegion manage to win a major, or if they place second, ultimately I want them to build on this momentum. I don't want this to be a one-off thing. I want them to be amazing in upcoming tier 1 events that they might be attending. So I really hope it's a competitive series, and I hope it's a 2-1 for Vitality.
Okay, Dualism, same question to you. Do you think GamerLegion can pick up a map, or is this going to be a shutout?
I think that if Zaiwu is able to finally bring what he is more than capable of doing in other tournaments to a major, especially in a grand final, then I think it would be a 2-0. However, I think if they have a slow start, I feel like it'll be a 2-1. Um, but yeah, I think Zaiwu being alive definitely is their strong victory condition, in my opinion.
I feel like it's going to be 2-1. I think there's a few reasons for it, one of which is GamerLegion come into this game, in my opinion, as just a massive, massive underdog with very little pressure on their shoulders. Yes, they're in the grand finals. Yes, there's a possibility of the major and all the accolades that go with that, but there's so much more pressure on Vitality. That crowd has been incredibly loud today. If they end up going behind and concede the first map, you'll be able to hear a pin drop. And that's really going to play on the team's mind. This home field advantage idea, I think it goes two ways. It's not always a net positive. It can sometimes actually be a detriment. The expectations, everything that's on your shoulders, being in front of your home crowd, your family, your friends, everyone watching across the world, and you're now expected to win this game, and not just win it, but win it comfortably. And if you don't, there's going to be some question marks. For me, I think that gives GamerLegion a real chance, especially, as Dualism said, if Vitality starts slow. We could even see another upset here, to be honest. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people anticipate and expect. So, with our penultimate round coming up to a conclusion with the finals tomorrow. Do you guys have anything extra to add? Any interesting nuggets of information before we head out, Frog or Dualism?
I guess my only kind of thing would be if someone told you back when GamerLegion first signed their team that had Scream and Existence on it, and you told someone that the one time that they'd be competing for a major trophy would be with Kiosk as their Belgian, I think people would look at you as if you'd been smoking some good stuff.
And yet here we are. Yes, indeed. CS is a funny old game, isn't it? It's obviously got a very rich and long history, and obviously with CS2 around the corner and this being the last CSGO major, many more memories and much more legends will be put into stone. Thank you guys very much for your time. Obviously tomorrow is the grand final, so we'll be back for our final episode of the Blast Paris Major. We'll see you there.